Hold on. A trade proposal just surfaced that would bring Adrian Kempe to the Toronto Maple Leafs for Bobby McMann, Nick Robertson, and a second-round pick. And honestly, if Los Angeles is actually willing to move their best forward because contract extension talks have stalled, Brad Treliving needs to be on the phone right now, because this might be the most realistic star acquisition we've seen proposed all offseason. All right, folks, we need to talk about what could be the most sensible, achievable trade target for the Toronto Maple Leafs as we head into training camp. We're less than a month away from the start of the 2025 to 2026 regular season, and Toronto still hasn't truly replaced Mitch Marner. We've discussed blockbuster possibilities like Philip Forsberg and Mikko Rantanen, but those deals require mortgaging the entire future. This proposal, acquiring Adrian Kempe from the Los Angeles Kings, is different. It's realistic, it's affordable, and most importantly, it might actually be achievable. Let's break down every aspect of why this trade makes tremendous sense for Toronto, what Adrian Kempe would bring to the lineup, and whether Los Angeles would actually consider moving their top forward. First, let's establish the context. Adrian Kempe is entering the final year of a 4-year, $22 million contract he signed with the Kings back in 2022. That carries an annual cap hit of $5.5 million, a very manageable number for a player of his caliber. The crucial detail here is that Kempe wants to stay in Los Angeles. He's publicly stated his desire to remain with the Kings long term. However, and this is the key point, there's reportedly no progress on a contract extension. The sides aren't close. That's a massive red flag for Los Angeles management. When you have a star player entering the final year of his contract and extension talks have stalled, you face a brutal decision. Do you hold on to him, hope things work out, and risk losing him for nothing in free agency? Or do you trade him while his value is at its peak, recoup assets, and avoid the nightmare scenario of watching him walk away for zero return? It's the same dilemma Colorado faced with Mikko Rantanen, the same dilemma Nashville might be facing with Philip Forsberg, and now potentially the same situation Los Angeles is dealing with regarding Adrian Kempe. This trade proposal comes from Nestor Quickson of Heavy Sports, and here's what he's suggesting. Toronto Maple Leafs receive. Adrian Kempe Los Angeles Kings receive. Bobby McMann, Nick Robertson, and Toronto's second-round pick in 2027. Let's analyze this from Toronto's perspective first. Bobby McMann is a 27-year-old winger who's shown flashes of potential, but hasn't established himself as a consistent top-six contributor. He's a depth player with some offensive upside, but he's not untouchable. Nick Robertson has been a source of frustration for Leafs fans for years. He's talented, he's got scoring ability, but he's struggled with injuries and consistency. At this point, he's looking like a player who might reach his potential elsewhere rather than in Toronto. And a second-round pick in 2027 is valuable, but it's not a franchise-altering asset. So what Toronto is giving up in this proposal is a depth winger, a former first-round pick who hasn't panned out, and a mid-tier draft pick. That's it. That's a remarkably affordable price for a player of Adrian Kempe's caliber. Compare that to what we discussed for Rantanen, Easton Cowan plus multiple first-rounders, or Forsberg, Ben Danford plus high picks. This is dramatically cheaper. Now, let's talk about what Toronto would be getting. Adrian Kempe is a 3-time 30-goal scorer. Read that again. 3 times he's eclipsed 30 goals in a season. That's elite offensive production. He's 28 years old, right in the prime of his career. He's 6'2", 210 pounds, exactly the size and physicality that Craig Berube covets. He plays with an edge. He's not afraid to battle in the dirty areas, and he combines skill with grit in a way that few players can. But here's what makes Kempe truly special and particularly attractive for Toronto, his playoff performance. The proposal specifically mentions that Kempe has produced more than a point per game in the playoffs throughout his career, 29 points in 28 playoff games. Let me emphasize that more than a point PR game in the postseason. That's exactly what Toronto desperately needs. The Maple Leafs have struggled for years to find players who can elevate their performance when the stakes are highest. Kempe has proven he can do exactly that. He brings skill, size, speed, and determination, a combination that Toronto has been searching for literally for years. He can play center or wing, which gives Craig Berube lineup flexibility. He's excellent on the power play. He's responsible defensively. He's durable and rarely misses games due to injury. There are virtually no weaknesses in his game that would make you hesitant about acquiring him. The salary cap situation is also perfect at $5.5 million. Toronto can absolutely afford Kempe. They'd need to move some money around. Likely sending out McMahon and Robertson helps with that, but it's not the financial gymnastics required for a Rantanen or Forsberg deal. This is manageable, realistic cap maneuvering that doesn't require Chicago or Carolina retaining salary or any other complicated mechanisms. Now let's look at this from Los Angeles' perspective. Why would the Kings even consider trading their best forward? It seems counterintuitive, especially for a team that's been trying to contend for championships. But the logic is sound if you accept the premise that Kempe might leave in free agency. If extension talks have genuinely stalled and there's legitimate risk that Kempe walks next summer, then trading him now makes strategic sense. Bobby McMahon gives them a youngish winger who can contribute immediately. Nick Robertson is still only 24 years old with offensive upside. Maybe a change of scenery unlocks his potential, and the second-round pick is a bonus asset for the future. It's not a blockbuster return, but it's better than nothing. Quickson's analysis suggests that Los Angeles might ask for a first-round pick instead of second-rounder, but given the circumstances, Kempe entering his contract year with no extension in place, they might not have the leverage to demand that. A second-round pick might be sufficient to get the deal done. The Kings are also at an interesting juncture in their franchise trajectory. They're trying to compete now with veterans like Ens Kopitar still on the roster, but they're not true Stanley Cup favorites. They've made moves to try to reopen their championship window, but results have been mixed. If they're facing potential rebuild or retool in the near future, getting younger assets and draft picks for Kempe could be valuable long-term planning. There's also the emotional and practical consideration of respecting a player's wishes. If Kempe wants to stay in Los Angeles, but the Kings can't or won't meet his contract demands, then trading him to a contender where he can chase a Stanley Cup is the right thing to do. It preserves a relationship. It treats the player fairly, and it avoids the acrimony that comes from forcing someone to stay somewhere they don't want to be. Let's talk about how Kempe would fit into Toronto's lineup. Immediately, he slots into the top six, probably as a second-line left wing alongside John Tavares and William Nylander. That gives Toronto a legitimate scoring threat on every line. Line 1, Matthew Knies, Auston Matthews, Max Domi line 2, Adrian Kempe, John Tavares, William Nylander line 3. Depth forwards rotating line 4. Checking line that's a terrifying forward group for opponents to match up against. You've got Matthews and Nylander as your primary offensive weapons, but now you've also got Kempe, a proven 30-goal scorer, providing secondary scoring. That depth is exactly what Toronto has lacked in recent playoff runs. Craig Berube would absolutely love coaching Adrian Kempe. He's a prototype of what Berube wants. Skilled enough to produce offense, tough enough to win battles, smart enough to play responsibly defensively, and proven in big moments. Kempe fits the identity Berube is building perfectly. There would be zero adjustment period in terms of playing style or expectations. The playoff implications cannot be overstated. Toronto's historical playoff struggles have often come down to depth scoring disappearing. When Matthews and Nylander get shut down or have off nights, there's been nobody else to pick up the slack. Kempe changes that dynamic. He's a legitimate threat to take over games. He's scored clutch goals before. He's been through deep playoff runs with Los Angeles. That experience and production could be the difference between another first-round exit and a legitimate cup run. Now, let's address the potential concerns and counterarguments. First, there's always risk in acquiring a player entering his contract year. What if Kempe doesn't re-sign with Toronto? What if he just uses this as a one-year rental before testing free agency? Then Toronto has given up assets for nothing. However, that risk is relatively minimal given what they'd be giving up. McMahon and Robertson aren't foundational pieces, and a second-round pick isn't franchise-altering. The potential reward far outweighs the risk. Second, there's the question of whether Los Angeles would actually do this deal. Maybe they're more optimistic about extension talks than public reports suggest. Maybe they think they can convince Kempe to stay. Maybe they're not ready to give up on their current core.